Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Molina, CEO of Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. Excuse me. This afternoon, I'm going to have an extended leadership conversation with Kris McAlister. Kris is running for Ward 3 City Council in Springfield. Kris has been working really hard with our homeless community, or our unhoused community, excuse me. And he's been working 12-hour days for quite some time, in some cases 18-hour days. And so I wanted to offer each candidate an extended leadership interview so they can get their story out a little better. It's hard for them to campaign when they're working and they can't go door to door. So it's just a little bit more difficult. So we want to offer each candidate an hour of time to discuss their leadership journey. So Kris, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you for making it. I know that you've been working really long, hard days. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark. Thank you for having me. Long days make the sleep all the more better.
Yes. And so I don't have anything pre-scripted. I don't have any questions. What I want to do is talk about what's important to you. What do you want voters to know about your leadership development, your leadership journey, a little more expansion on your areas of service to the community in which you serve, and how that would translate for a voter voting for you for Ward 3.
Yes, sir. Well, again, thank you for this opportunity. With so much changing all the time in our community, in the state, and in the world, it's really interesting to see how things go. And just like my life, I've been able to adapt and flow. It's always been by external forces that has opened up either opportunity or closed doors that made me refocus and try to just maximize the greatest good, so to speak. When I was able to help be part of a solution, there was something to be said about contributing with everybody as opposed to just going forward with what I want, what I think. There's so much more enriching efforts to be able to build as a team. And I feel like that's one of the things that is what I've been working on lately, which is building teams, leading by example, and trying to solve solutions in the now. Too many people think about what are they going to do in the future when we have problems to resolve now. And so I try to be a realist and a pragmatist when it comes to fixing now so that the future doesn't become unwieldy.
So let's talk about some of the problems you're solving now, your area of service to the community. What kind of problems are those?
Right now, I serve on the Poverty and Homelessness Board as a voting member. I lead the Lived Experience Advisory Group for that board, which is called LEAGUE, the Lived Experience Advisory Group for Unhoused Engagement. And that has been able to help steer and influence decisions countywide regarding the unhoused population, from homeless youth to homeless families to homeless seniors and everything in between. There's 100 different ways to become homeless in this area and to stay homeless in this area. And there's not so many solutions. And most of the solutions are cookie cutter fit. Everyone looks like the same, and it doesn't necessarily serve the bulk of the population. And so people specialize or they generalize to the point that so many others are excluded. And so the work that I've been able to work on is looking at each person as an individual by using a topic such as the COVID crisis or the winter strategies, to be able to try and serve all of that community instead of going, I want to serve this small pocket of the community and just power through with that. And so I feel like that has helped influence some of the ways that I would want to lead and want to represent. We have people across the whole entire city who have different spectrums of what causes them to care and feel about different things. And it's been kind of an interesting parallel. I currently help at the shelter that's opened up in Springfield. It's medical respite for COVID protection. It's a stay-in-place option for the people of Springfield and the greater Lane County.
Where's that
I
located?
am the shelter manager, so I'm the person in charge of the site, and helping staff and helping adjust and adapt to the environment while helping each individual as they are in that time. 24/7 stay in place for a population that isn't usually allowed to stay in any place for longer than an hour. So there's a lot of dynamics, both discomfort for those who don't know what to expect because they're not used to people being nice to them. They're not used to people helping without having something else to get out of it. And they're not used to being able to be free to do what they want within reason in any given space. And so being able to help cultivate and nurture that instead of oppress it and squash it has been really uplifting. It makes the long days so much easier to get through.
Mm-hmm. Where is this medical respite located at here in Springfield?
The respite shelter is on 765 A Street. It's the Memorial Building,
Oh,
a
okay.
building that has a storied past of itself of service and of change and adaptation to new realities. Are you familiar with the building?
I am. I'm just a little disoriented. It's been a long day, so I apologize.
No worries, right across from the post office. It
Yes,
used to be
yes.
the memorial building for veterans. It was built for that in the after World War II and became our park district building. So many Springfield memories are in that building. So
Didn't that also serve for a portion of time the school program, the school district?
yes, sir. It was more recently before it became the Egan Warming Shelter site during this off season. Um, it was the part of the school district's project, and so I think it was an alternative school.
Yeah, I remember my older children. They would have school dances down
Mhm.
there, downstairs, right? So,
Yes, sir. Upstairs, downstairs, and it was also the teen center where a lot of our youth, my generation, went and played pool and played video games and got to see a lot of the park services that our city offers.
yeah. So, how many people can stay down there?
We have 32 spots, and while I immediately slipped into medical respite, it is a respite shelter. So we do have medically challenged people, but it's not solely medically respite. So I just wanted to correct that as I realized I said medical.
If someone has medical needs and they're there, what kind of medical support do they get while they're there, or is available to them?
Well, depends on what they are having issues with. If they have COVID-like symptoms or are presenting at least one of the symptoms of COVID, they would go to the Wheeler Pavilion over on the fairgrounds where Occupy Medical, which is an awesome nonprofit that's now based in Springfield, helps with them. When they're at our site, we are able to help coordinate care. We have been able to hook people up with Right Source rides. We've got cahoots to take people to the hospital. We've been able to, through our own assessment, find out whether or not someone has a fever, but not high enough to be COVID-like, and be able to help get them basic care. Basic first aid support, wound care has been present, and at times we've been able to partner with the local providers to try and help get people in faster or in a different way given these new times. We're
Mm-hmm.
currently working on setting up the rest of our network so we can provide telemedicine for our clients,
Mm-hmm.
where they can get access to counselors, prescribers, and other types to be able to figure out where do we fit this. Today, we also hook people up with their pharmacies. I help people who were about to run out of meds or had run out of meds to be able to restore their care and reestablish their medicine.
So this is a tremendous passion for you. You provide a lot of incredible leadership to this part of our community, this, uh, I would say, underrepresented part of our community, or the people it's easy to learn to turn our faces from. And you're not doing that. Where does this passion come from? Where does this desire? You're obviously a community leader. You're obviously a community activist, but and the community activist has to have a lot of passion behind what they're doing, because it is hard. You're an unsung hero, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, but you're doing a great work. And one of the things I want to talk about in this interview is I'm listening to you speak, Kris, and I'm listening to you explain this entire process in great detail and how you're helping, serving, leading, guiding, providing through multiple agencies resources, this segment of the population, if you and your cohorts were not there, this would not be happening. Where did this passion for this type of work come from your life experiences?
Well, I would have to say that first of all, I was a homeless youth. So I spent time on the streets for numerous years here in Springfield, Eugene. And as such, I helped pull myself together and start to reflect on both myself and how I can improve as an individual and the greater community, and how I could try and not have other people fall into the same situations that I experienced or the ones that I heard about from my peers or that I saw in my community. And once a certain wedge has been driven, it becomes a focus, because you see how other people are and you see how other either opportunities or injustices bring the voice up and out. And so I I've seen a lot of half supported ideas get moved through, and I've seen very strongly supported and smart ideas die. And so I know that sometimes it's time, place, and manner. And with the homeless people, there's never the right time, there's never the right place, and there's always the wrong manner when it seems to be public policy. And so you need to have a consistent voice, you need to have a genuine voice, but you also need to have a compassionate voice. And so I find that having been there, having seen at least some of the doors closed. Now, my experience is uniquely my own.
Yes.
Nobody else has had my experience, just like I've not had everybody else's experience. But by being willing to open the voice and share the voice, to hear others and speak that truth because you have your own investment in that same type of truth, I think that's where the passion comes from. Truth and justice.
Truth and justice. Now, if you're elected to Ward 3 City Council Ward 3 City Council position as a candidate, this is a huge part, being a former homeless youth, working with this segment of our population. First of all, what kind of voice do you want to give to this type of services you believe are needed? And how do you believe, if you're elected, your leadership in this arena, in this area, could build that bridge between our city government, and our community as a whole to this, maybe for lack of a better word, an outside community? Would you agree that that's okay term?
Yes, sir. I believe so. Yes, upset community.
Outside community?
Outside. Yes, sir.
Okay. How would you, if you're elected, how would you like to bridge those gaps between policy, government, the community, to bring a positive voice, a positive presentation of the struggles of that segment of our population?
I would have to say that I'm already doing part of it by being part of this multi-jurisdictional body, which is solving the real-time problems of today while trying to have an eye at the future, because we try to meet the needs head on. We know that through smart, dialed adjustments, we can prevent problems from getting worse. We already have a large scale issue. We already have a large scale problem that is neglecting vital parts of our community. When someone falls into homelessness, people forget or don't care to know why, generally speaking. Now, I'm not saying that there's not compassionate people who wonder why all the time, but the majority of society seems to forget that there's different roads to poverty and through to homelessness. And as such, they're colder to the solutions. They don't look at how this might affect the cost of public safety and public health when untreated people, over-enforced people are moved around and then punished. They don't look at the cost of putting people through the court system with charges that are never going to pay the fees and social justice mechanisms that are going to supposedly correct it. You can't price out homelessness. You can't fine out or imprison away homelessness. And a lot of the people that we have getting out of our justice system, who leave with a record, who leave with a mark. They can't get higher up a lot of times, and so they fall back and fall down. And so you have a lot of people who lose faith in a system, who lose faith in a an opportunity to pull themselves out. Once you start a certain spiral, it's very hard to reverse that spiral.
Mhm.
And so as such, I think that by recognizing that we have a greater investment to our community by dealing with the leak now, instead of waiting for it to get bigger and then trying to deal with it when you already have puddles everywhere. I feel like titrating answers, being an active and able participant in the conversations that affect not only the local community, but the greater regional community. I feel like that's an example of how we could address this as a city government. And I think that that's the type of leadership that not only do I experience, but I also advocate for. We need all partners in, all community in, to trying to find a solution for all of us. People don't see how housing and employing people who are currently not housed and not employed will help lower our tax base, keep our rates low for utilities and other prices, and help local businesses thrive. When people have money, when people have opportunity, they generally keep it in their community, unless we aren't providing things in our own community, and then they go elsewhere. So
Mhm.
we have untapped resources, underutilized potential. And I think that as the next city councilor of Ward 3, that I can help promote that and help nurture that.
Now, you're on the budget committee for the Springfield Utility Board. You're currently the chair of that committee. Uh, you understand, I think, after having multiple conversations with you and hearing you speak, you have an acute grasp of the financial requirements of the financial costs, the financial demands, as well as the financial burdens by not contending with this issue it has on a local community. From a budget basis for the city of Springfield, they've got to contend with PERS, and now we're going to be dealing with post-pandemic and some challenges for the budget, I'm sure. How do you think, as a Ward 3 city councilor, if you're elected, you would be able to address some of the areas that are important to you with a limited budget, or would you try to offer some type of long-term timetable?
Well, in regards to the current crisis, the COVID crisis, we as a community are factoring a lot of our investments based off of what we can get back from the federal government through FEMA dollars. And so as such, we have a pathway that we're trying to spin within to be able to fix things. And so when we know the payback scale and the timetable for returns on that and how long it could be, we actually, I think, have more opportunity to do things now than we've ever had for the greater part of our community. And so I think some of the tools are just knowing where the resources are and knowing how to utilize them. We have a great underutilization or optimization of our opportunities. There are so many small business grants and local investment opportunities that are people don't really know about, or we miss the boat because we're focusing on more mainstream things like loans and collaborations and buyouts. We're interested in uplifting people, and the budgets ebb and flow based off of outside and local options, so does the debts and the opportunities. And so I think that we're uniquely poised to come out of this better than other communities based on how we're trying to smartly and pragmatically get through this. Now, long-term timetables can be helpful in the short term,
Mhm.
but it seems to come with a greater cost and a greater weight down the road the further you kick it down. And as the dollar value changes and as opportunities to pay back and rates go up, it becomes more and more heavy. It's like a poor person with debt. Once they hit a certain threshold, it's like, okay, no matter how much you pay, you're still going to be underwater. And
Mhm.
so I think Springfield is one of those towns that likes to pay its debts first and then work on the future. And so I like to look at the future while paying on my debts. And so I think that that's one of the ways that we would be able to get through this by having maybe a short-term dialed action, taking advantage of those local dollars and state dollars and federal dollars that will be coming by investing right now in those solutions, as well as having a shorter timetable with a quickness to pay back the debt, so that that way our taxpayers don't get sucked into greater debts. The PERS, I support PERS in terms of what it has done for our workers, and I support the fact that a contract that is honored should be honored. That said, I don't think that we should have let it go this long as we have. I think we should have paid it back a long time ago. I was a young child when a lot of these agreements were made, and in my mid-teens, we had an opportunity in the state to invest in paying it back and possibly being sound. And I don't know from my experiences that that was necessarily always the focus. And so we've continued on, we move things on, we kick things down, and then we go, how do we fix this now when it's too unwieldy?
Well, I'm impressed. I'm impressed with your adept and acute knowledge of this picture of monies available, the ideas that you have, very innovative, very intuitive. So if you're elected to Ward 3, it would then need a presentation for policy. Policy to city government, policy to the community, policy to community resources, not just in Springfield, but to Lane County and then other people you would hope to get or garner support from. You know, the pathway from FEMA, look at the future while paying your debts. If you had to put a policy together, and I know that would take time and a little bit more thoughtfulness, but you do have a great deal of insight currently as I'm listening to you speak. Give me some kind of idea what might that look like as a policy presentation to our elected officials, to community leaders.
I'm trying to unpack that question a little bit. I apologize. As a policy suggestion, so like what would an example of my approach be in terms of a
Yes.
policy?
Yes.
One of the things that we've encountered while we seek to solve housing crises is immediate action and a way to minimize the effect on businesses. Now, I'm currently operating in a shelter in the middle of downtown. We have a lot of concerns. We have a lot of risks that we have to mitigate. We are around other people. We are around other community members, and actions that are not accounted for can negatively affect the livelihoods and safety of other people. So my interest would be possibly, as an example of a policy decision, would be to create a opportunity for people to, with their closed or unused property, if they had vetted and supported casework folks living on their sites or staying in shelter on their sites on days that were cold or untoward, or if they help support through a Conestoga or hosting a medically fragile person, that they get a tax break, that they be able to be compensated by their community for helping mitigate some of the costs that could then go forward. Those dollars would then allow other people to focus on delivery of services and supporting those individuals to get out of their plight, or at least reduce their quality of life issues to the point that they could start to thrive again beyond merely surviving. Another example would be by trying to equalize the burden of debt and of investment in our community, offering an annexation package in our UGB, allowing people who come into our city, who want to join into our city, several incentives to want to. Maybe it's a reduced price library card for a little bit for people who are in our UGB, helping court them. Maybe it is like being able to help tie in at a reduced cost to our systems for a certain amount of time so that they actually have an interest in doing it. If you look at Glenwood, we have a very strong interest in investing in revitalizing Glenwood. We have a 380-page, I believe, document that charts the 5-phase program of bringing Glenwood into Springfield and bringing Springfield up. And so within that document, it has rules and allocations of where to put this type of industry and where to put this type of structure. And so with that in mind, people who currently live in Glenwood have to pay a whole lot of money to be able to tie into the current infrastructure that's not finished. It's not even in phase 2 yet. Yet it's hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes just to get into the sewer. We have people in Glenwood who are 2 houses down from the Franklin, from McVeigh Highway, who can't call the police for basic crime because the sheriff represents them and they have so many units throughout the whole county. So there's incentives for people to want to invest and be in our community, and it has a long-term investment. So when people annex into our city, they start to pay our taxes. They start to pay our utilities. They start to invest in tax levies, and they participate in other things. So I feel like it's in our best interest to support bringing more people into our city, not into the limited housing stock that we have, but to expand our bases where we already are allowed to start to build housing. And so a policy example is utilize the community we have, utilize the future we know, and take in and invest in the people that we can. And so,
I have a question about this concept, this idea of annexation.
mhm.
I know a lot of people, as you're saying, that technically live in Springfield but live in the county. And so that changes taxes and revenues, things of that nature. If you wanted to present a change in city limits and in regards to annexation, would that go through the city? Would that have to go through the county? Would it have to go through the courts? What does that look like, annexation?
Well, I'm a voluntary annexation supporter. I do not believe in forced annexation unless there are public safety, public health issues. And even then, I think that at that point, it should be referred to the voters. And so with that in mind, and allowing those who are within that jurisdiction also to be able to vote in said election, or sorry, not election, but process. And with that in mind, I also think that the courts already weigh in through the land use laws and through city challenges and things like that. And I believe that businesses also weigh in by supporting those regions and advocating and lobbying to governments to either expand and zone in certain ways, or to build housing to support those businesses in those areas, such as Franz did, um, supporting our local economy over there, Williams Bakery, rather, back in the day, and
Mhm.
UPS is back there. We have a lot of businesses in our current Glenwood place that could even benefit us more by being in the city. So yeah, I think that it's a multi-tiered process, and it could be a long-term one or a short-term one based on how it's geared. But ultimately, it belongs to the people. The voters should always have a say as a community in how it grows and how it goes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't trying to put you in a bad position. I just, you've been the first candidate or anyone really I've heard in a long time speak about annexation, and I was struggling to remember the process.
Mm.
And so now that as you were speaking about that and you were bringing sharing all that information, I was like, okay, no, that's right. It's, this is how it works. This is what it looks like. Because I live on off of Mount Vernon and 57th, and there was a big wreck out on Bob's Straw a couple of months ago. And I call the police because there was several cars, and it's just right here down the road at 57th, quarter of a mile from my house. And they said, no, we can't go there. It's the county. But in
Mm-hmm.
my neighborhood, it's SPD, the Springfield Police
Mm-hmm.
Department. So it was that reminder. I was thinking about that when you talked about annexation, how even so close, and yet there's a boundary distinction that prevents particular services from participating. So thank you for that. I wasn't trying to put you in a bad place. It was very helpful to hear that explanation. So thank you.
Yes,
Now,
sir. May I add a caveat to that question as
yes,
well, or that
yes.
response rather? Um, the current option outside of forced annexation is financial annexation. You pay a big fee to tie in, and those fees do go to help our city,
Mhm.
but it's a short-term big debt that alienates a lot of people to where they would rather stay outside of our limits and pay lower county taxes and be able to keep what they have. A lot of times when you move into a community, you can't necessarily grandfather clause a lot of things. If
Mhm.
they forcibly annex you, then sometimes it seems like there's more leeway to a grandfather clause as a
Mhm.
kind of like, here you go, sorry about that.
Now, on the
So I just want
candidate,
to add that.
yeah, thank you. On the
Mhm.
candidates forum, one of the other things you also mentioned was a path to residency. Let's talk about that a little bit, because if you're elected, how would you present this a policy around this concept of residency? Can you expand on that a little bit more? What does that mean?
Well, yes, sir. We have a little bit of a, in my opinion, a brain drain. We have not as many opportunity, and we have not in terms of housing or jobs in a lot of places where people who are from here have the ability to shine and utilize a lot of their skills. In terms of Portland offers higher wages, they offer better benefits, they offer competitive options. Whereas a lot of our stuff, we have big players, but sometimes they're the only players in our community of that industry or of that type, or they specialize to the point that they're really refined. I think Symantec is a version of that. We don't have another competing interest to Symantec locally,
Hmm.
not to the level at least. Hynix may have been close, but that was a different ball game too.
Yes.
And so um, when we invest in those big picture ideas, we don't always take in consideration what happens when giants move or when industries die. And so Springfield has always seemed to see an ebb and flow when it comes to options. The mills closed. The the tech industry was killed a little bit with when CDs became obsolete with Sony. We have lots of big jobs that move into town and then they leave, and so then they displace a bunch of people who move elsewhere, or they go back to where they had come from to go see this big opportunity. So path to residency is, how do we either keep people in our community so that they want to have families here, want to establish home ownership and help invest in our community, or bring people here who not only want to be a part of us, but don't have to compete for the same limited housing stock. I mean, we need to be building like we want to have people here and stay here instead of having the market decide fully, in my opinion, who should stay and who should go.
Hmm.
I have dozens of friends and family who now live in other communities in other states or other parts of the state because of the fact that their rent went up and their job went away. Their schools didn't get enough funding and closed some of the programs that they wanted to have their kids participate in, and so they left. So how do we invite people in to experience, as our council puts, that hometown feel and want to make and keep Springfield its town? And part of that is also recognizing that all of your residents make up the community. So when you live here, not when you own property here, not when you pay large amounts of rents like what used to be required to even vote in this country,
Hmm.
um, but because you are here, because you stood and asked to be counted for, that you get to have a say in part of the decision making. We
Hmm.
need to make this place a home for every resident. And so by having a path to residency, we're looking at, how do we keep people here? How do we celebrate who you are as you are? And how do you make Springfield shine? I'm a resident and I'm proud.
So residency, a path to residency, you're talking about income earning opportunities, uh, the ability to afford to live here, the school system that is more than adequate for your children or other people's children, having a chance to have a voice and involvement in the community as a whole. That is what you're speaking of, correct?
In addition to being able to be who you are in your community, when you have a voice, it has to be your voice, it has
Mhm.
to be in your tongue, has to be in your feel and in your experience. And if you cannot say that voice in those terms, then you have been denied your essence. And residency, in my opinion, especially when it comes is tied to pride of your community and pride of your locality, is it's all tied into being genuine, being who you are and being all that you are. And so it's a more complex item than some of the cut and dried political points, but who and where you are defines where you'll go,
Mhm.
in my opinion. And so we want our schools to be excellent. We want our jobs to provide living wages, but we won't get that if we don't listen to the voices of all of our residents. And so we won't get that if we close our doors to future generations who will bring their skill sets, their traditions, and their voice to our future. And so I feel like there's a lot of exclusion and a lot of the housing opportunities. We get these big developments, we get these big ideas, but we forget about the little ideas that made us grow, the little guys who made the big ideas. And so Path to Residency is about trying to secure and keep those peoples, keep our high school graduates in our community, have people from other states and other countries come and be a vital part of our community, because they're all invested, all interwoven into that future.
Okay. We have Riverbend, we have Kenzie Willamette, we have a portion of Symantec remaining. What used to be Sony is now multiple other areas, other businesses. I remember when you brought up in your interview, your candidate interview, Bruce Kelly, what the city managed to do out there and now it's a vibrant business hub and a business center. Do you think that we can continue? Do you think we have, in your opinion, based on what you see on a daily basis, an infrastructure in the city, whether in buildings, empty buildings, or land, to be able to continue that type of construction that invites business hubs, so to speak?
I do, to an extent, and this might come off a little weird, but I want to support local businesses as well as the big businesses that come here. Now, a lot of the businesses mentioned are operated out of other centers. Very few places call Springfield their home base. And so I feel like as long as we continue to court those big contenders, we should continue to try and support our local providers. And so if we do both, then I think, yes, we will continue to grow and thrive and whatnot. If we rely solely on external led groups or big businesses that are so diverse that they don't necessarily focus on just our local needs, but make decisions based off of external markets and external policies, then I feel like we may run into a little bit of a struggle. Our city infrastructure is strong. Our economic development plan is refined. We have great leaders and we have great staff and great leaders among our staff who help revision, repurpose, and adapt to changing things on the ground all the time. And then we take things like Borden Chemical, which then became Hexion, which then became um, everything begats, but they make the glue that holds CLT, cross-laminated timber, together. Cross-laminated timber is what we are promoting to build with in Springfield in the form of a parking garage, but it also has properties that would be able to make low-income housing be safer and more effective if used in certain ways, because it has a better fire protection, it has a better sound barrier, it has all these other things. And so Springfield itself, with one of its small options, is helping promote something that's big, a new industry. And we don't even have the technology as a whole to do these big projects to put some of this stuff together. We just provide that one part, but that one part is essential. And I like to think that the small parts in Springfield are essential.
Let's talk about, we got about 20 minutes left, and I want to talk about some of your other leadership experiences and how they molded you and fashioned you. Do you feel comfortable at all? You're under no compulsion to talk about your experiences as a homeless youth. You grew up here, you saw many different things here. How did those experiences give you your leadership paradigm and help form your perspectives that made you the leader that you are currently today?
I would have to say, and thank you for that question, and while it's not necessarily a fully comfortable one, it is one I'm willing to speak to. There was a lot of character growth allowed through this process. I started really young. I started couch surfing at 13. So it affected my ability to attend school. It even led to my expulsion from school. So I had to find a new path. I had to throw away everything that traditional folks say you have to do because it was taken out of my hands. There was nothing I could do after a decision was made by an external force to change my opportunity when it came to school. So I carved my own way and got my GED, started attending college 15, 16, being able to try and keep up with people who had stable housing, not sitting in front of Jim's Landing using the light from the bar to read my textbooks, as I lived in my car outside of church where they would let me use the bathroom once in a while. Adapting, adjusting, refining, accepting that life isn't fair, but we can carve out a space if we work, if we try, and if we reach out and build collaborations. I did not get off the streets by myself by any stretch. There was a strong community program. There was strong support for that program. There was government support for that program. And there was a willingness to challenge my own beliefs to be able to improve myself. It caused me to get a chip on my shoulder and then remove that chip. So when you are able to shed your own bias and be able to look at things with a new light, it's one of the few things that I can think that I can pull out of that experience that really made it worthwhile. Now, there's a lot of hurt, there's a lot of pain, and there was a share of discontent and awkwardness, but I'm better for what I went through because I went through it and I survived. And now I've made it part of my life mission to reduce suffering, to reduce harm, and to provide options to move forward because everybody deserves a chance. Everybody has something to provide. And no matter what people do to kick you down, you still have value and you fight back, you can prove it.
No, that's a really important part of your leadership story, your life story, why you have the passion that you have, why you've taken this opportunity to run for city council again, why this is really important to you to make sure that the community as a whole has a voice. I hear all three of you candidates for Ward 3 consistently talk about wanting to represent the entire community, and I believe each and every one of you. And I believe each and every one of you has that burden in your heart and that desire in your heart and that sense of purpose in your soul to make sure that those that are underrepresented have an opportunity to be counted, so to speak. So that's really, I hear what you're saying because I was orphaned young and grew up in different homes and had to deal with a lot of rejection. And, you know, you never fit in when you're an orphan. You never fit in. You're never accepted. You never belong anywhere. And people don't let you forget it. So I identify with what you're saying and what some of the things you must have felt in that journey of coming up, growing up, breaking out, breaking off, and being able to move forward with a new sense of purpose and vision and capacity, knowing that it can be done, that you had help, there was community support, there was a lot of people that came to your side, organizations that had the ability to help you rise up out of the ashes, so to speak. And so now it gives me a better understanding and awareness of this leadership mantle, especially in this strong area. We can't do it without policy. We can't do it without government. We can't do it without money, whether it's government or nonprofit or contributions in whatever form or fashion. You couldn't be at the this respite for the Egan Warming Center site if there was not community support for that. You would not be in a position to be helping those people. And you know, I'd like to say to you, Kris, that I didn't understand the homelessness issue either. You know, I'm 55, so I grew up in a completely different generation than you did. Both of my parents were Depression era babies, and my grandmother telling us stories that during the Great Depression, 1 month, all they had was a bag of onions. So they would eat raw onions one day they would eat fried onions, one day she'd make onion soup, right? So I grew up in a different time where you were taught you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps no matter what it is. No excuses. You're responsible, and if it goes bad, it's your fault. And that's the culture of life that I learned as a child. That was always with me. But several years ago, I worked in one of the warming sites in the wintertime, and I was talking to this gentleman who was there, and we brought him some food. Community leaders brought food, things of that nature, and I asked him, you know, how he was doing, and I asked him, what happened? Why are you here tonight? I wanted to know because I didn't know anything about it, this area of our society or community. And he said, I lost my job. I can't find work. I couldn't afford to pay my rent anymore. We lived in our car for as long as we could. Finally, I sent my wife and my children to live with other family members. And I kept the car so that I could try to find a job so that I could drive to work. And then my car broke down. Now I don't have any place to live. So I'm here tonight because I don't want to die on the street. And there was multiple stories like that I talked to several different people about how that happened. And it changed my paradigm significantly on things that I didn't understand, that I felt like I had a responsibility to try to understand. And here you are, the young man that you are, and you have an acute insight to this need in our society because you lived it. And I think that's a compelling part of your leadership message. That's a compelling part of your leadership style, and where you put your energies and where the areas that are important to you to make a difference. If you are elected to Ward 3 City Council, this won't be the only issue you have to deal with, as you know. There'll be a broad spectrum of different things you would have to contend with, different policies, people, segments of the community. How do you think that you would balance all that out? And if you had to take on all these other areas simultaneously, are you concerned that maybe you would feel like you're hurting the community you're at now because you might not be able to give them the same amount of effort and energy?
No, sir, because well, thank you for the question. No, sir, I don't think that that it would be lessened, because of the fact that I'm already serving in the capacity I am while doing the work that I'm doing. I'm not elected to the positions I'm in most of the time. I was elected to the sub-budget committee chair, so after being appointed to it. But that said, I do the work, whether I am a volunteer city councilor with small times to do things, but a lot of responsibility to do it in, but also a community worker. When you are already immersed, it's kind of hard to just lose it. So my daily life, my day job is literally helping my people. And so with that in mind, going to the meetings, looking at other focuses, weighing out the decision making and whatnot, I have to do that on a daily basis with individuals. So the fact that it might even be a little bit more generalized might be a boon for me.
Now, You said you were going to college early on. Did you ever finish that portion of an educational journey?
I did not, sir. I've started several times, but due to my disability, I have a genetic disorder. I got sick a couple times, and it led to that one of those spiral type things that you were talking about.
Hmm.
And so, whereas I have the education, I don't necessarily have certificates. That said, I'm a rogue scholar. I am a constant student.
Sure.
I Are you familiar with Mass Online Open courses?
I've only heard of it. I've never visited it.
Those are free college classes that you can audit and take, and they're from real colleges.
Yes.
Like I'm taking a class right now from Notre Dame. I have a class from the University of Jerusalem on biochemistry. And so it's like being able to explore and constantly learn. I audit these classes, and if I wanted to pay money to get a certificate, I could. But my journey has been about learning and adapting and utilizing. And
Hmm.
whereas I would probably have a lot more opportunity right now if I so chose to finish and get certain degrees, I feel that the applied knowledge and the applied education is as much as valuable, which is why I tell people who owe money on their debts for school, but learned the work and kept the passion to keep finding something because you will find your niche and it does exist because you generally wanted to serve.
Well, I would agree with you. There are many forms of education. We underestimate the applied knowledge aspect. We underestimate the on-the-job training component. We underestimate and give very little value at times these days to on-the-job, boots on the ground, so to speak, involved leadership and that leadership development. So I appreciate what you're saying, and college certificate, a college degree. There's a lot of people that have significant college educations, and good for them, but don't have a lot of very good experiences, or very much experience, I should say. Not trying to be negative there, but our experiences makes us more than the book. The books we read are important, but sitting in a classroom learning theory is not always the best teacher for all of us.
Mhm.
And I'm saying that because it's obvious that you have been living your passion, and you're very articulate, and you're very intelligent. You're well grasped on an incredible grasp on the intricacies of the social issues that you're involved in, and some of the outer components of services, industries, budgets, policies. It's very interesting in that way, that you don't have a degree hanging on your wall, but you definitely have a degree hanging on your heart. So let's talk, we got just a few more minutes here. Let's talk a little bit more about your leadership development. Any other experiences that you want to talk about? Any other board experiences, service experiences that served you?
Excuse me. Well, I was a Boy Scout in Springfield, and from an early start, I started to learn about process and participation and different roles that people can take in their community. The first time I ever saw a city council meeting was because of a merit badge requirement and a rank advancement requirement. Starting to be in that leadership role, starting to be in part of the patrol leader council, which helped
Mhm.
map not only decisions for your unit, but for your entire troop. Then going to Boy Scout leadership training and having not only the basic principles, but the more advanced topics expressed.
Mhm.
Joining an international nonprofit at the age of 16 as the advisory chair and youth liaison was able to happen because I already had board experience. I already had the understanding of Robert's rules and being able to apply a process to get decisions made and lead to outcomes. This
Mhm.
led to several other opportunities as a youth. I became part of the Layton County Community Healthcare Centers Advisory Council, representing homeless youth with the likes of the head of the local CCO, the Coordinated Care Organization, with doctors and superintendents and other folks who make key decisions. And so it's one of those when you have a certain experience and you start to build up a certain skill set, it opens doors. And so, and by doors, I'm not talking about for advancement. I'm talking about for idea creation and action production. So it's like community things ripple. One person is but a piece to the greater team, and that team moves forward together. And when you bring your entire crew up or your entire city up, then the only people to lose are those who didn't. And so, with that in mind, I have a lot of little niche uh, um, groups that I've been a part of that maybe didn't go very far, but they always tested, they always challenged, and they always pushed for something better. I'm currently on the Square One Village Board. I'm currently serving on the Eugene Springfield Solidarity Network. Those two items help me explore different concepts, sometimes with the same industries. You're looking at housing and how do we help residency, and you're looking at how do we help social issues and labor issues. And then you go and you join a board like, or a body like the Poverty and Homelessness Board and the Sub Utility Budget Committee. And you're again looking at some of the same demographics, some of the same jurisdictions, but with a different filter, a different lens, and a different outcome needed for each thing. And so I feel like by being able to not only survey each of these different parts of industry and each of these different parts of society, but also being able to help carve space for folks who maybe not had the same belief that in themselves or in their community as someone who's been able to look, hey, this is what we do, hey, this is where we go. One of my most recent participations in leadership was the Springfield City Link program that came about shortly after the ICE contracts were terminated in Springfield due to public action. When the public action was happening, it became evident to our city that a lot of people don't necessarily know what all we have going on or who makes certain decisions and why some policies or decisions are in this agency's portion. And while we want to believe that some entities or boards can control things, other things are out of our hands, or some things just aren't meant to be voted by the people because they are a decision by a private entity that then has a contract that then does this other thing. So being able to explore those systems and see not only the gains, but also see the barriers and the obstacles that each group either participating or being affected by can have. So CityLink allowed me to have an open, wide view of how every main department of our city works, from the elected to the selected. Um, with that in mind, I'm very honored to be able to learn from some of the greater contributors to our community, from um, Representative Lively, who has shown how public and local politics going to the state can lead to ripples across. What we are doing with ADUs, what we are doing, the accessory dwelling units, what we are doing with our structure and our growth is being mirrored in other places. It's being represented in other places. Being part of the Poverty and Homelessness Board and seeing some of our decisions and some of our recommendations being implemented in other communities in a very real time and very future focused manner is very, very productive and enlightening. And I'd have to say being on the Poverty and Homelessness Board and Springfield Shelter Rights Alliance has allowed me to be able to see things at the same time from two totally different perspectives. The local vision, how do we carve safe space in Springfield while making results? That SSRA was the group that helped form G Street Oasis, which helps our homeless families here, as well as helped create Egan Warming Centers, which is our only winter option outside of our big structure. And on top of that, the Poverty and Homelessness Board, where I serve on 10 of its subcommittees and work groups and lead a couple of them, including the RFP, so request for proposal / evaluation / homeless management information systems committee. That deals with federal dollars and budgets that fund our entire county's process, while also leading the Lived Experience Advisory Group, which is made up of 100% formerly homeless persons. I feel that these types of experiences, local, regional, individual, collaborative, help make me the leader that I am and will be, because I'm always working on better. I will never reach best because I always have room to improve, and so does my community.
Well, very good. I couldn't ask you to make a better closing statement than that. That was very powerful. Um, you're very competent. I appreciate these conversations with you and the other candidates as well. You're all very qualified, capable individuals, skilled leaders, experienced leaders in your own right and in your own fields. And you're all, quite honestly, to be emulated for your sacrifices, your devotion, and dedication. So it's been a real pleasure today, Kris.
Thank you, sir. Likewise. And I'm honored to run alongside Johannes Tadeo and Corey Rodley because we all will bring Springfield a better future. I just would like to be the one to be able to show my example first and be able to help bring people in for all of Springfield. So thank you again for this opportunity.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for all your hard work, all your long hours at the site, and we wish you well. And I'm sure we'll see each other very soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you to the voters.
Very good. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.